simple as designing the flow rates for the pipes, the fixtures, and simultaneous demand and the hot water demand and all that sort of stuff that really gets forgotten about. And like I said, it's not until you actually build that and you go, like I should have lent in and I should have paid that extra money. You could argue that plumber, they should know they're a licensed trade and they're qualified, and yes, that is true. But unfortunately, the reality is that if they were that good at doing what they do, we wouldn't be here.
Russell, welcome to the first episode of your own podcast. How are you feeling?
Thanks, Kai. Yeah, it's nice to be on the other side, I suppose. It's something different. So you're looking forward to diving into it.
Bloody oath, let's go straight into it. So we'll get started and kick things off nice and simple. For anyone who doesn't know what hydraulic design is, could you describe that for them?
Yeah, it's a good question because hydraulic design, I guess, judging by the phone calls we receive, sometimes people associate that with hydraulic pneumatic pistons and hydraulic rams and things like that. But hydraulic design to us and those in the building industry is basically plumbing design. So anything with fluid or energy, stored energy, is what we design. So hydraulic design for us is sanitary drainage, stormwater, gas, water service, and everything in between. So a rounded version is the plumbing design, I suppose.
And from my knowledge, it's quite a niche area. Is that correct? Like, it's something that not a whole lot of people get into, and it's kind of not really thought about too much in the industry when it comes to these builders and constructors. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is to a certain extent. It is, and it falls somewhere between. It's not a dedicated engineering degree, so there's mechanical, there's electrical engineering, and there's civil engineering. There's no per se hydraulic engineering degree that you would do. So what we find is that a lot of the mechanical guys, which I guess is probably the most similar degree that would sort of, I guess, somewhat fit into that hydraulic design, which we'll probably touch on later on during the podcast, but that's where the frustration comes from, is that we've got engineers that really haven't got a plumbing background that are, I guess, moonlighting as plumbing designers. So that's where it normally comes from.
Yeah, cool. And so, like, when to someone that you've just met, obviously, I've had it with myself since I've started working here. Like, I've had to describe this to my friends who don't necessarily understand the industry. Like, if you were to describe what you do and what OTG, hydraulic design, actually does, how would you describe that to someone for the first time?
How did we describe it? We describe it to them as, for us, I guess in a nutshell, we get people from where they are to where they want to be. And that is normally where the lost cause, where they say, we never knew we needed this, or which is, a lot of a direct reflection of the NCC coming out, and people are now wanting people to sign off and essentially, put their name and their design and their tickets on some of these designs. But what we normally say is to keep it brief. If someone doesn't know, we just say we're hydraulic engineers and we design plumbing in commercial buildings.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense. Now, to kind of take it back a couple of years, when you first finished up with schooling and everything like that, you went straight into plumbing, and you had developed yourself with 20 years of plumbing experience on the tools. Like, what kind of pushed you to make that move and step off of the tools and into hydraulic design?
Not by choice, put it that way. I ended up in an office role, and that was when a company I was working for went quiet, and I moved back to Perth from working up north. And because I was working on the mines, I had plenty of savings, and I was quite happy to lie on Consultancy beach for all day, every day, working on my tan. But one thing I did notice was the savings were deteriorating quite quickly. So with that, I decided that I just needed something to kill time. Money was no object. So I didn't need the high paying job. So I took an office role as I think it was a junior estimator scheduler for a new housing company, high volume builder. And rightly or wrongly, I never got back out on the tools. I never, one thing led to another, and I ended up being a manager at that business. And then went out to go back on the tools, but as soon as I had that, people found out they had that estimating background. They sort of stuck me back in the office to help with the estimating. And like I said, rightly or wrongly, never got back out there. But I guess that's just the path that, the unknown path that, it's a bit woo-woo, but I think the universe has always got a plan for us, and that's just how my journey began off the tools. And it's a classic case of, when you're on the tools, you want to be off the tools, and when you're off the tools, you want to be on the tools. So there's no, it's not all strawberries and cream being off the tools, but sometimes you'd argue that it's easy to push a mouse around than push a shovel around. And sort of, I guess, as I get older, I'm grateful for that, having that ability that I can work in an office. Not that we love it all the time, but it's a nice change.
That initial change when you did try to get back onto the tools, and you had that estimating background, you had a lot of your bosses and stuff like that kind of telling you, like, oh no, we want to use you as that estimator role. We want to use that talent. Did you want to do that? Was that something you wanted to follow through with initially, or was that something that you kind of were like, oh no, well, like I want to be on the tools. This is what I want to do.
Working in the northwest, and with average temperatures of 45 degrees, you're always quite happy to work in the air-conditioned office at any given chance. So that's first and foremost. But look, I guess it's hard, and what I know now, I certainly didn't know that at the time, but it is hard to get someone with on-the-tool experience to then apply, the off-the-tool, do the estimating or do the, and a lot of the estimating roles that I have had is primarily a business development role as well. So you do a lot of BDM, and, you're following up in quotes and people, you're negotiating, and I enjoy that part of it. I enjoy the negotiation. I enjoy I don't really enjoy the being bent over all the time by everyone trying to squeeze the price, but it's part of the job, and it's a fine line of, trying to get the job over the line. And still, be profitable for the company you're working for, but still trying to win that work without selling yourself too short. And I like that challenge. I like that, and it can be a cruel game. It can be very boring at times. It can be very thankless, sort of at times. It's we always laugh and say, we only win the jobs when we miss the most. That can be true. But it's one of those things that it has its good points and it has its bad points. But you just have to, like anything, you just have to grin and bear it, dig deep, and it can be rewarding when you can land some big jobs. Obviously, if you sleepless nights as well, wondering whether what you've missed. Yeah, like I said, I sort of fell into it and never really got out of it. So it's sort of like you fall into the honey pot, and then you're sort of stuck, and you sort of you got that honey on you, and you sort of. Maybe the employees sort of thought he was shithouse on the tools. Let's get him off there, and he can do less damage in the office, which was always the running joke. Like, we put people in the office because they can't make as many mistakes.
And that's exactly why you are where you are today. Now, like starting your own business, obviously it's a big accomplishment, and you've come a long way since you initially started. But when you did first start OTG Hydraulic Design, was there any massive challenges that you faced initially, and kind of what were they? What were those big things that almost broke you initially that could have stopped you from getting to where you are today?
First, so it was OTG Group, and the initial thought process behind that was to go out and freelance and freelance estimate. So I really wanted to help the guys in that section, because the guys they were too small that needed a full-time estimator, that were pricing for themselves, albeit not very well, and doing it late at night, and they just didn't have the resources to be able to price their own jobs. And what we found is we were coming up against some of these really, really average, I guess, plumbing companies that just had no idea, and no fault of their own, but had no idea about estimating and what it needed, and just sort of the fundamentals of not only the estimate, but making sure that you weren't selling yourself short. And at no time at all did I ever think that people were out there deliberately sharpening themselves. I certainly don't think that's the case, but it was just they just didn't know. So you don't know what you don't know. But for us, as someone that that did know, we found it challenging that we're up against these guys, underquoting, and like I said, not by choice, just by lack of knowledge, I suppose, lack of experience. So I saw a gap in the market where I went, we need to help these guys. We need to get these guys up to where they need to be. They can't afford a full-time estimator. So there's a gap for me that I can help those guys out. So that was the initial stage. Unfortunately for me, I won all my clients quite a lot of work, and after that, they didn't need me.
Yeah.
It was a dead-end job. The harder I worked, the more I won. I was left standing there going, well, their books are full. Most of the guys, we probably doubled their revenue in the first 12 months. And a lot of the guys then, once they doubled that revenue and got to where they need to be, they had the capacity to employ a full-time estimator. And that's a big jump. Like if you got, it's realistically, if you look at it, depending on who you talk to, but the estimating role can be a lot of dead wood, especially if you're not winning that much work. So it is like it's a big jump to go, do I want to employ a full-time estimator? And if you do, that person's going to be flat out. And then you've got to quote all these jobs just to keep that person busy. So depending on where your revenue is and what your turnover is, sometimes it's just that middle ground that we don't need a full-time estimator, but we need a bit more work. And who does that role? That was the space, the void we tried to fill. And we did that quite well. And in fact, we did it so well that we did ourselves out of a job. So my next caveat or next sort of opportunity that I saw was how shit the designs were that were coming out that we were tracing over and we were pricing. So that's, hence when we got quiet, I was like, well, what other gap in the market do I see? And that was, lack of experience, plumbers out there doing the design work. Like there's some older guys out there, some very good older guys out there, and they're a dying breed. They're getting to that age where they're about to retire, and the young guys coming through, they're just not there. So that was the next market. And the gap that I saw was like, well, let's, if I'm so passionate about hydraulic designers, what am I going to do about it? So that was the transition to hydraulic design.
And that was how you kind of overcame that initial, I guess, kind of bust with the business where you made all these people all that money and then they kind of didn't really need you anymore. You kind of diverted into this kind of sector and you were building up those plans and making them better. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and it's very hard to because it's seen as dead money. Again, depending on who you ask, but there's a lot of quotes that we do and a lot of estimates we put forward and put a lot of time and effort into. There's a lot of intellectual knowledge, but someone can pay us some good money to price it for them, get them right where they want to be. Only to be outdone or beaten by someone that is done it at midnight, in between changing the baby's nappies or with one eye open, half asleep. So they've paid this thousands of dollars and then they've gone, well, mate, you're $100,000 over. And it's like, well, no, we're not $100,000 over. Someone else is $100,000 cheaper. And so how do you justify that? They've gone, well, we've just spent a couple of grand and we've got nothing to show for it. That's the perception. The ones that are smart about it will know it's a game of numbers and they'll push through that. Some of them spent, 40, 50, upwards of $70,000 with us before winning their first job. But that first job they won was $1.5 to $2 million worth of work. And in fact, we won probably 2 or 3 of those projects for that particular client. So in that case, they go, mate, the best $50,000 we've ever spent. So in that sense, but someone starting out, someone with a small company, that's a horrific amount of money and for no real reward. So it's a mindset game as well.
Yeah, I mean, kind of on that topic of those design drawings and those plans, like you, as we said earlier, you've got 20 years of experience on the tools, right? How did you kind of take that knowledge and influence kind of the work that you do today?
What we generally found was that there was, I guess, lines on a paper. So with no real thought process on how those lines interact and how they actually stack or how they actually work on site. Our personal belief here at OTG is that we do the design and we do the thinking for them. So as the same, it's similar to an estimator. An estimator builds a job or goes through the job, plan by plan. So before the job actually even starts. And it's the same with a hydraulic engineer or a hydraulic designer. We build the job and do the job as we would do it out on the field. So we don't draw something that we know is going to be difficult and just really awkward to build on site. So we do the thinking for them. That's our job. The plumbers on site shouldn't need to work out how much grade or how much fall they need and all that sort of stuff to go then be using their calculator on site. It should be on that drawing. And so they can see what's been drawn out and what's been mapped out in the easiest, most buildable scenario.
Yeah, and I mean, our website, otghydraulicdesign.au, it states that on the website, right? Or it says it's plumbing systems that you don't have to think about. And I guess you have kind of explained it there, but like, what in practice, what does that really mean? Is this you taking that prior knowledge and making sure that, like, if you were the one to be receiving these plans when you were on site, that you would be happy to proceed with that? Is that kind of what that plumbing systems that you don't have to think about sentence means?
Yeah, pretty much. Like any plumber that picks up our drawing should look at that and go, that's exactly how we would have done it. Too often we found that drawings that just made no sense. The pipe work was sized to the Australian standards, but as we know, the Australian standards is a minimum standard. It wasn't fit for purpose. Like we were seeing 50 millimetre shower waste in floor waste gullies for showers in in commercial aquatic centres and public use buildings, which we know. What goes down those drains, I'd hate to know. But one thing I do know is that 50 mil is just not suitable. It's not practical. Yes, it might be the Australian standard, but the Australian standard is the minimum standard. So what we do is we think about the plumber coming behind them. So when we put in the clean outs and we put in all the infrastructure, we not only think about the plumber that needs to do that job, because a lot of our jobs, they don't get stress tested until the client moves in. And once the client moves in, it's all too late. And what I mean by that is we had one job, I think it was McDonald's, where one of the pipe was laid, at a flat grade, and we had to cut the floor up. Not me personally, but the plumber had to cut the floor up. Now, that Mackie D's, as we call them, was a 24-hour store. And so they've just moved into the 24-hour store. They're up and running. They're going guns blazing. All of a sudden, they're getting blocked drains. Like in a food processing and restaurant environment, like you can't just shut them down and say, sorry about that, guys, just pack your burgers up. We're just going to cut the floor up and relay this drain. Like you get one opportunity to do it. Once those buildings come live and under load, it's what we call operational load. So no one's, running the hot water systems flat out. No one's running the sewer drainage flat out. No one's, flooding the stormwater flat out. It's not until everyone moves in and it's under, general load, realistic load, that you start to find where the systems break. So we like to think we're ahead of that curve. We're thinking about, not only just getting that job done, but we're thinking about the plumber that's, going to be on the hook for the 12 months DLP period. And not only that, they're also on the hook for the 7-year guarantee for the workmanship. We don't want to set them up to fail. We don't want to give them something that, that might work and might be textbook okay. We want to give them something that's going to, A, is how they want to do it anyway, and B, that's going to work, and also how we're going to, prolong that and give that a good serviceable life, well past once that plumber's gone.
And yeah, I mean, spot on. It's kind of been touched on that buildability aspect, right? And that's kind of what you're going for. It's a massive part of OTG's philosophy as well as your own philosophy, and like that you've kind of described it. It's what that buildability actually means, right? It's making sure that these clients, when they are getting into their, when their building is finally going up, right, and these systems are finally running on their general pace, it's ensuring that, like that McDonald's job, that they're not going to be shutting down within the first couple of weeks, and making sure that we're preparing for that kind of stuff. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's like, there's a lot of, particularly now, there's a lot of value engineering and value management, and everyone wants everything for cheaper because the prices have escalated so high. So it's like, what can we do to bring the price down? And what we're really sensitive to and really careful with is putting in what we call Taiwan tin. So yes, it might get you to that budget number, but what does that look like in 5 years' time when you've got to replace the hot water units, or there might be a cheaper alternative? But what does that look like for the person, that's, 2 or 3 years in, that all of a sudden has got this tapware that's got a 12-month warranty, was made, just for the project, just to, as a volume buy, no longer available in Australia because it was specially made just for that project, just cheap and cheerful. So there's a fine line. There's a fine line of, value management, but also you want something that's not going to be not worth what it is, because general rule for us is the poor man pays twice. So, and that doesn't always apply. Like that philosophy is great in itself, but there is a limit to it. So it doesn't mean we have to buy the biggest and the best, but it's up to us to engineer that to make sure that the compromise that we're taking on price, and if there is a compromise in quality, what that looks like, and is that value for the price we're paying? Does that price affect us and the quality of what the long-term product is?
Moving into hydraulic design, obviously, as we stated earlier, it's a quite a niche area, right? Not a whole lot of people know what it is, but the people that work with it, and like a lot of those builders, those project managers, like what is one common misconception that those people have about hydraulic design, and how would you kind of shift that perspective that they've got?
No, I wouldn't say it's a misconception, but I'd say that, there is an element where we're not required. So in new housing, for example, you would normally have a hydraulic engineer because it's vanilla. It's just a 4x2 house. It's, what can go wrong? We do 1 million of these. And that's true to some extent. I guess the misconception comes is it's, my plumber can do that. And you know what, there is some merit in that, because a licensed plumber does know how to size, you know, pipe work and ring mains and things like that. That's part of their job. That's part of their getting their license. So they are licensed to that. They just don't do it every day. So that's where we come in. We do it every day. We give them the calcs and we sort of vouch for all that. We can dial it into, we can tell you how many seconds it's going to take for your hot water to reach your tap. So the Hilton Hotel, for example, runs on a minimum of, or a maximum of 6 seconds. So 6 seconds from turning the tap on to receiving the degree temperature of water, normally tempered. But the misconception there is that, my plumber will work it out, which is, like I said, it is somewhat true. Another misconception is that, as we stack the floors, it's just copy and paste. It's like, it's just lines on a paper and you just copy and paste it. And it's like, yeah, well, that's great. But also as well, you don't know how good or bad the hydraulic design is until it gets to site. Until you get there and go, you know what, this is, where were you guys 2 years ago? We do a lot of expert witness stuff and we get exposed to a lot of things that don't work, which arms us to the teeth on what we need to look out for. And we get to see other people's failures and what that looks like when you don't get it right. But unfortunately, when at this point, everyone's gone. So the plumber's gone. In recent times, the builder's gone. And then you've got a scenario where it is the developers normally left holding the ball and carrying the baby, because everyone else is gone. Everyone's like, well, that's, it's someone else's problem. And generally speaking, it's not until someone does their second or third or fourth build that they then go, you know what, where were these guys? Like, that they might look at the price and go, well, that's horrifically expensive. That's not what I need in my life right now. And that may be true. But like I said, it'll be your second or third build that generally we see people go, I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm going to go engage someone that, and it's for an example, we had one the other day where he wanted some advice on a septic tank that he's getting told about. We sent through a fee proposal to meet with the builder and the plumber on site, and for whatever reason, the value, maybe from our point of view, wasn't communicated back to him enough. But he obviously didn't see the value in using our services, even though this was his dream build, this was his forever home, over 4,000 square metres, and he wasn't prepared to pay and didn't see the value in that fee that we put across, which in my eyes was quite reasonable. He didn't want to pay for the 20 years of experience that we had. So then he was going to go into battle with the plumber and the builder with the only information he had, which was a quick phone call with us, which is fine. We're happy to do that. We're happy to help. But when someone wants to meet us out on site, that's a different ball game. So it's the perception of value, and we always say it's the pain of change. So you're not going to change that attitude that you need a hydraulic engineer, or you're not going to change that perception of the value of that until that pain point becomes too much. So the pain of not having one and letting it go tits up versus the pain point of going, you know what, I'd rather part with, that $5,000 to get that 20 years of experience and to save me that problem.
It's the whole idea of, spending that money now and then not having to worry about that later on down the track, and it's if you don't engage that hydraulic engineer, if you don't engage someone like us and you do come up with those problems later down the track, you end up spending that money that you were initially going to spend, and it just causes more pain points for yourself further down the track. And when you think you've gotten that property ready, and then all of a sudden you've got all these other problems that have popped up.
It'd be simple. It's as simple as something like on a big house like that. It'd be as simple as, designing the flow rates for the pipes and for the fixtures and simultaneous demand and hot water demand and all that sort of stuff that really gets forgotten about. And like I said, it's not until you actually build that and you go far out. Like I really should have lent in and I should have paid that extra money, but. I guess, and that's, that part and parcel is we try and educate people through that. And you could argue that, the plumber, they should know and, they're a licensed trade and, they're qualified and yes, that is true. But unfortunately, the reality is that if they were that good at doing what they do, we wouldn't be here.
Spot on. The whole idea of that is, I guess, just listen to Russell Green. He knows what he's talking about.
Depending on who you ask, but yeah, we like to think so. But, and, I guess for us, we're just I guess, and the pain point for us was we were sick of the frustration that's out there with these developers and these builders and these architects that just, in our opinion, just aren't getting they just aren't getting their value for money. They're not getting the service they deserve. So we always push. We push that we've been at the coalface. We push that we're trade background. We've pushed that for me, I'm a licensed plumbing contractor with 20 years experience, so we know what works on site, and if it doesn't work on site, we're the first ones to go out and drive out to site and rub shoulders with the plumber on site, not only because we're equal to them, we stand shoulder to shoulder with them, but we don't sit behind the desk and just say, well, let's draw something that's never going to work. It's mission impossible to work with balcony drains, and they want to create falls in balconies, and you've got to run a million miles of pipework at grade in a 172 slab with top and bottom mesh with minimal fall. And no wonder these balcony drains end up running flat and backing up. No one sees that until probably 4 to 5 years after, under the load, once they get full of silt and all that sort of stuff. So we're privileged to know what that doesn't work. We're privileged to know that that we need to be better. We're privileged to know that there's a better system out there, and everyone just flogs these plans that are compliant and to the letter of the law, maybe, but are they fit for purpose? Is it really going to stand the test of time? Like, we want to build our designs that are built to perform, and that initially might be a bit more cost involved, but we'll convey that to the developer or to the architect to say, listen, there's a cheaper way of doing it. These are the downfalls. There's another way we can do it. This is the upside. And let them make that decision. But it's our job to inform them of what options they do have. It's our job to make them know, and that sometimes they don't listen, but that's okay. But at least we've told them. It's our job to put them into perspective. All the a lot of the expert witness stuff we do, we're working for the courts, but it's our job to, it's like a royal commission. You wouldn't do a royal commission if you didn't know the outcome. Like it's one of those things where you need to inform these people before they're going into battle to know that, it might be their mistake they've made. They've engaged us for a sum to defend them. But what we find is sometimes it's actually, this was a design, this was a construct only. This is your design. This is the downfall. We're not going to send them in blind. We give them the opportunity to say, this is how we see it. At least they know they're not going to go, flying into court and burn hundreds of thousands of dollars if they know that outcome.
Yeah.
What they do with that and how we can manage that to swing it the other way is another thing. But it's as long as they know, as long as the awareness is there. Because if they're not aware of it, they don't know, they're none the wiser. And that's what they come to us for, is to give them the straight shooting advice, how this is going to land and how we see it playing out. And I guess that's to date why we've been as successful as we have.
We give them that information, we give them that choice, and we make sure that they know that whatever they're going to be doing is what those effects are going to be, and how we can give them the best solution to make their property or whatever it is that we're building for them as good as it's going to be in the long term.
Yeah, and we invest in commercial property ourselves here, so we treat it like our own. Like we would never put anything into a product or a design that we wouldn't want to see ourselves or we wouldn't do to ourselves. So, and sometimes that is budget constraints. If we know that it's a product that's going straight to market and there's no longevity that's required, then sometimes we look at it and go, well, this is going to get you to where you need to be. And that's all. People don't come to us because they love us. They come to us to get them from where they are to where they want to be or where they need to be. That's it. No more. There's nothing more, nothing less to that. We're just the conduit to get them from where they want to be to where they need to be. That's the long and short of it. And we respect that. We understand that. So we always try and put ourselves in their shoes and go, if that was me, what would I want? How would I want to be treated? How would I want, if they want to follow up, or they want a phone call, or whether they, they want a quote back in, 24 hours or whatever, can we expedite that, and can we shuffle a few things to make that happen? Like, the last thing we want to be is the drag on the least we can have to do with the project, as far as the quieter we can be. We don't want to be the noisy one that's like, we're waiting on this person, we're waiting on that person, or we're still waiting on that. We want to, we're just the conduit. So we don't want to hold anyone up, and we just want to give them the best advice we can based on the 20 years of experience that we do have and all the intellectual knowledge that we have within this team that we have today. Collectively, there's probably over 60, 70 years of on the ground experience. And we want to do things differently. We don't want to do things the way they've always been done just because that's the way they've always been done. We'd like to challenge the status quo and deliver on what we say we're going to deliver on.
Spot on. Like I've really enjoyed our chat today. I hope you have as well. Look, are you looking forward to the future with what we're going to be doing with the podcast?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's again, it's against the grain. I don't know any other hydraulic engineers that are doing podcasts, but it's a way for us to communicate our message. And a lot of the information out there is, would rather just have a quick chat about it and talk about it. And there's one thing we can tell them, one thing we can teach someone if they just take a sort of a snippet of what we have to say and that can help them out, then that's great. That's all we're here for, just to bring some awareness to the industry. And, there's enough out there at the moment in bagging builders out, bagging the construction industry out. Some of it's warranted, but there's some good people out there doing some really good work. And we really need to put the spotlight on them because they are out there, against the grain that are, not going bust and Phoenix companies setting up the next day as someone else. These guys are doing really good work. They're really busy and they're doing, and we're getting tarnished with other people out there, and it was just general. But I feel that it's like the news. They want they want a story, and the story is always what sells it. So, but there's always good out there. So we want to bring the good where the bad is, and bring the light where the darkness is.
Perfect. Look, we'll wrap it up for the first episode. If you enjoyed your conversation with Russell and you want to follow along as he talks to some of the people that are working in this property industry and bringing in some architects and building developers and kind of expanding that area a little bit as well, chuck us a follow, listen in. We've got a lot of good stuff coming in the future. So
click the link below.
Spot on, mate. Hit follow and we'll see you on the next one. Happy days.
Thanks for having me.
Sweet as.